So, Nigel, this is a situation that the club has been discussing for a number of days now, but does last night's development and this morning's announcement come as a shock in any way?
Well, I think looking at what's been going on in other countries and the postponement of sporting events and football matches behind closed doors, it's kind of been looked inevitable to me that at some point this would be arriving as an issue for us. So it's not a surprise in that way. I think that the speed and change of events is a surprise. Yesterday afternoon, the Prime Minister was talking about big sporting events carrying on, and we then get a couple of high-profile people inside the game, Arteta at Arsenal, for instance, being shown as positive, and things change very, very quickly. So I'm pleased that this decision's been made. I think it hasn't come driven by attempts to look at supporters. It's been more about the players. But I'm pleased that this has happened because I think it's the right thing to do.
And obviously the immediate question that springs up from this is how do we go forward in terms of the season as a club, tickets and everything else that goes with putting on football matches?
Yeah, well, this is the great unknown at present, isn't it? There's another EFL meeting next week. We've got a period of a hiatus to see how things develop. And at the moment, if these games take place, in reality, you could argue that there's not much difference between a postponement today and a weather postponement. The game would take place. People who had bought tickets would be able to use them at the next game. Those who couldn't make it would look to do refunds, etc. So we've all experienced that before. The big question is whether these games ultimately take place. And I think that is when things is a great unknown at this time.
And that is a fact, isn't it? We can't even begin to second guess whether we can say the season won't end, the season will end, it will be extended. All of that at this point is still up in the air.
Yeah, it's absolutely total speculation. If you look at where we are this week compared to last Friday, and if you look at us today compared to Thursday night, things have moved on a pace. So to speculate about what will and won't happen, I think is not helpful to anybody. But obviously, we behind the scenes we're planning and looking at what the ramifications could be, and obviously that's what supporters are interested in as well. There's a lot of unknowns at this time.
And there's been a lot of worry and concern and comment about the financial implication, not just in the wider game, but to Carlisle United specifically. Are we able to say whether there will be financial implications, particularly if some games don't go ahead in the near future?
Well, it depends on what happens as a result of the games not taking place. So in the short term, there's a cash impact in that games don't take place, so you don't have cash coming into the tills. But eventually, if they do take place, you should get that money. That should happen again, although it might be less when you have Saturday games compared to Tuesday games, because we know that the gates are lower, so that will be an impact. What happens in terms of if the games don't ever take place is the great unknown, which I think is a big concern to everybody within the EFL, and it's a matter that lots of clubs have been thinking about and lots of comments already been made, because everybody knows that EFL clubs, Carlisle United, are reliant on ticket money and funder money. And if the ticket money drops, then there's a gap to fill because wages still have to be paid. So that's a major concern. And I think that's why I think we just need to see where this pans out in the future.
And even though there are a lot of questions that simply can't be answered at this stage, the fact is that the club, the authorities, they're in constant contact, and as the dynamic situation develops, we're reacting with that in the best interests of the club.
Absolutely, and that's players, staff, And when we say the club, I include supporters in that, because we are one club and we're all in this together, which is why I said I was pleased that the decision was made to suspend the season. Obviously, there's clearly more risk to individuals when they're in close proximity to each other, and there's more risk to people of a certain age as you get older. So the fact of the matter is, we have a number of supporters who fit into that category, and therefore it's a concern. I've had a number of conversations with people at the EFL over recent days, and in the same way that it's fast moving at a club level, it's fast moving at the EFL league level, as demonstrated by the fact that yesterday there was no plans to have a meeting, and less than 24 hours later there's a meeting held, and the season's postponed for a while. So it just shows how much of unknown territory we're all in. I think that the key point, again from my point of view, is that because we don't know a lot about what's going on, I think it's better to be cautious and find that we maybe have overdone things rather than regret not taking action early. And that's always my view about things like this.
And another example of how we're going to have to react in terms of the on-the-field stuff, the manager is going to have to work out a way of making sure that if this season does kick off again in a few weeks' time, that those players are ready.
Yes, and that's it. I spoke to Chris this morning about the practical realities of this. The advice from the EFL was that it was down to the discretion of clubs how they trained and what their training requirements were. So we discussed that. Chris's viewpoint was it's a tough balance. You can't turn fitness on and off, and there has to be a degree of continuity. And how that works is something that Chris is thinking about, and the club will support him. We're fortunate at the moment that we haven't got anybody who's showing any symptoms. We've got nobody who's been tested. But that can change very quickly, and the more people have this, the more chance that it's going to visit our door. And again, I think it's inevitable that happens over the next few weeks, and we'll have to deal with that.
And just finally, Nigel, you've rightly in your statement this morning asked the fans to be patient, but I think you've got an intention of keeping everybody updated as much as we can every step of the way as this situation unfolds.
Yeah, I think we've got a duty to do that. We are in unknown territory, and I think things will continue to move quite fast. The other thing is, I think things will continue to change a lot. So it may well be that what the advice is one day changes the next. I think we've got to expect that. I think from an operational point of view, as you know, we've had discussions with staff all week about minimising time at the club, minimising contact with staff and colleagues within the club to try and reduce the risk, hygiene, all these sorts of things. And I think that's going to go on for some time. I think the chief medical officer on the TV last night mentioned up to 14 weeks before we get to the peak, and then a period after as we come down the other side. So this issue is going to be long term. It looks like it will get worse continually now for a couple of months at least, and that means that if, as we sit here now, we can't hold football matches, how that's going to pan out when it's worse in 2 months is a really big issue and a concern, because having decided that today we can't hold games, if we then think it's going to get worse over the next 2 or 3 months, how can we then start to hold games? So those are big issues that are not going to go away, but we'll keep the supporters fully up to speed. I think what the supporters can expect is that from a club point of view, things like the shop will be open less. Clearly the ticket office, we've got no tickets to sell, so that's likely to be closed for the foreseeable future. There'll be people inside the club, but it'll be a skeleton staff. Obviously public and community visits will cease for the foreseeable future. These have got big implications, but we've got to do the right thing by staff, players and fans alike. We've only got one chance at this.